Hello, everybody. Saludos. ¿Cómo están todos? Thank you so much for joining us for another episode here of our interviews. We're really, really just honored and excited to have the beauties you see in front of you. We have Patricia and Erika here from El Sereno Green Grocer. Woo! Let's give them a shout out. And their dog, so we don't want to.
Pumpkin. This is Pumpkin.
Don't want to forget to mention. So thank you so much for sharing your time and sharing your space. I think you all have a lovely story, and we want to make sure that we elevate it and that folks know about you and who you are, not just your business, but who you are as human beings and what brought you to this space and doing what you're doing. So that's why we're here. And I just love the energy and the love that I feel coming across the screen, and I know everybody's going to feel it as well. So thank you again, and let's just get started. So we're going to start with the typical first question around just to tell us about you. Who are you? Tell us a little bit about yourself. Whoever wants to go first.
Thanks, Rocio. Hola, everybody. Bellas. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. And I will introduce myself. I'm an immigrant. I came over in '86 from Mexico. My mom and my stepdad recently married, and we landed in San Diego because my dad was in the Navy. He joined the Navy as part of a way to immigrate us, actually. He is Haitian American, a first gen also. So I come from an immigrant family that grew up in San Diego and went to school in Santa Cruz, and made it down to LA back in 2001, and kind of stayed for one reason or another, and have now made LA my home. Patricia and I have been here in El Sereno since 2015. After we finished a little stint in the military and came back from Spain. And the VA benefit allowed us to purchase a home, right? That was very helpful for a non-traditional couple to be able to own a home or qualify for funding for a home. And so since that time, we've been in El Sereno, and about 4 years ago, in 2019, we started volunteering at the community garden, El Sereno Community Garden. Where we haven't left actually since, in tending for the land and tending for our community and growing relationships with the land, with our Tangba relatives, with the plants and animals around us that are native to this land, right? The community, the long history of El Sereno and its community struggles and hardships and challenges and celebrations, right? There's a bicentennial committee, right? Like, that's saying a lot. There's all kinds of history here in El Sereno. And when we became involved with the garden, our biggest ask was, what do we need, right? What do we need to be a thriving community? And what we heard from folks, from members to visitors to guests to all the people that we know in terms of friendships and relatives, they wanted a grocery store. Our front door neighbor, Gloria, was like, we need a grocery store. There's nothing here. There's 2 grocery stores that are over-processed and not nourishing, not fresh produce. Like, you should put a grocery store in here. We're like, yeah, right. What? A grocery store? We don't, how? Like, way above. And here we are. Las groseras del Sereno.
I love that.
So we just listened to the community. That's a little bit of where we come from and how that stemmed. It's a little entryway on to where we are today, but it feels really good to be connecting and to be sharing something that we were able to bring into life, to grow and into something that is what the community asked for. Our little piece of contribution is how to make our community a little bit more sustainable, right? How do we answer to our community in ways that are um, health healthful for us all and the planet and the environment and each other.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Patty, what about you?
Yeah, so I am born and raised up in Ohlone territory, up in the Bay Area, in a spot called Redwood City. And then actually, I was born and raised in a spot of unincorporated land that is known as Little Mexico, right outside of Redwood City. And so a lot of immigrants there are from Michoacan. But my family, my dad's from San Luis Potosí, and my mom is born in Mexico and raised in South America, but her family is from Ireland. So I am a mixed little mama, but I grew up in the Bay Area, very much in a community like El Sereno, and I grew up walking, I lived on Middlefield Road, which anyone in the Bay knows, or in Redwood City knows Middlefield Road. It's sort of like Huntington Drive here in El Sereno, super busy. But that was like the first place that I was allowed to walk alone to the corner store, down Middlefield Road to the corner store, which was like a panaderia and a little convenience store. And I grew up going to that shop. And then as I got older, I went to school in Berkeley, but I lived in Oakland, and I lived in East Oakland, and we had a little corner liquor store that also had our eggs and our milk and just the basic things that I would get. And so, so I grew up in the Bay. I moved to LA in 2009 for a program at UCLA in the urban planning program. And most of my work has been working with survivors of gender-based violence. So that's people who are surviving interpersonal violence, but also violence from systems in our communities. So that can be the La Migra, police, folks who are enacting violence. And so one of the ways over the last 25 years of this work that has always really grounded us is through food. So I am also a survivor of gender-based violence. So one of the ways that that trauma shows up is through a lot of disordered eating or not eating or zoning, or, what is the word? Disassociating from the body and not paying attention to what it needs. And so food, in all of my organizing and all of the healing justice work that I've done, food has always been a central part of coming back into the body, healing. It's been a really big part, especially for women of color, of connecting to the ancestral foods. That in many cases, especially here in the US, like there's a modern food system that has disconnected so many of us from our food, or has shamed many of us for what we eat in our cultural foods. And so a huge part of the organizing work in that movement has been around food. And so actually when Erika and I first met, she reached out to me over Facebook 12 years ago now, to ask if she could read some of my writing about this. And so we connected around food and about thinking about healing. And our first date was a dinner in our backyard. No, a lunch that turned into dinner. And it's just been sort of a cornerstone of like there's this thing that we eat every day, several times a day, and sometimes it's a huge burden. But it's also a moment that can be really sacred and beautiful and nourishing. So when we moved to El Sereno and really started working volunteering at the community garden, we really got to deepen this conversation of like the cultural dimension of food, talking about food ways, connecting with folks who are Tongva, but also people of the indigenous diaspora, which is a lot of Latinos. A lot of Latinos are indigenous to other parts of the Americas, and so really connecting with the different foods, the different myths, the different foods we don't have contact with anymore, seeing if we can grow that in the garden. And then we also started a few years ago a food distribution. So every other week at the garden, there is free food that we give out, and or we give out through the pantry. The food pantry, is that? Yeah. And that really did generate these conversations about what people want to see more of in our community. And I don't even know, we were asking, but we were just also listening, and we were part of these conversations. And I was getting at a point in my nonprofit career where it was time to, I had trained folks and built out teams, and I was just ready to move on. And so in the last few years, as we were exploring, are we going to have children? Are we going to do something else? Because, you know, with 2 women, you have to do a lot of planning if you want to have kids. And so through that conversation, and this was a lot of messaging from the garden too, like, we want to generate life and to nourish life. And actually, it doesn't have to be by us having a child, you know? And so we got really clear on that. Like, we literally paid for and went through all these tests to be like, oh, actually, no, that's not the route we want to go. And through those conversations also was daily conversations at the garden around people saying, well, if you want to change and you're ready to really commit yourselves to something, we're ready for this grocery store. So that's sort of how we landed here.
And that's
And we
here
got a dog. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me and us, and the road to this shop, which in many ways is a love letter to like the corner stores and tienditas that are still totally around here. And we see ourselves as very much steeped in that tradition. And we did not have one in this little corner of our area, you know, so we can walk to the shop. Many people can walk to the shop. And
we walk to the garden.
Yeah, we walk to the garden. It just feels like really an homage to the food, to our ancestors, and to the vibrant shops that have kept our communities alive, you know? So,
Yeah. That's so beautiful, and beautiful how you thread kind of your experience, both personally, professionally, and kind of what's bringing you back home, and what really centers you and grounds you to a bigger cause, a bigger purpose. And so we do want to dive into that a little bit more. But when people go into the store, so as you're talking about kind of how the store came to be, what should they expect to not just see and observe, but experience? What is both your hope and your plan, and what you've built, right? If people were to walk into the store, what product, are you selling? What experience do you want people to have? Just tell us a little bit more about the business.
when I started.
Because mine was
ready.
but the other way. Go ahead.
Oh, you want to go the other way?
No. Go ahead.
We hope that okay, let me back it up.
Right. Go ahead.
Well, we haven't actually talked about this because it just came up, but I would say we hope that when people enter, they feel a sense of home and belonging and nourishment. And that's really like the cultures that we come from. And in many ways over the last 11 years, we have been building home in ways that people will come, because we often have food here and gatherings and communication or book talks at our house. And people are like, can you scale this up? Can you like make this more of a thing? Or the garden, like, how can you make this more? And so in many ways, when you walk into our shop, you see a little bit of an extension of our home, which is also an extension of our mom's home and our grandmother's home. It's very much rooted in traditions of creating places of care and relationship, delicious tasting food,
Nurturing.
chisme, laughter, dancing, tea, both literal and community chisme in the good sense, not the gossip that hurts, but more like in the ways that we share information. And so in the shop, there's a sense of belonging and welcome that in the best case, hopefully many people have experienced either in their own home or walking into someone else's, or a mother's home or a grandmother's home or a friend's home. And there's also, we've done a lot of work to curate what is there. It's a very small shop. And so we are really clear that we want to prioritize food makers and creatives who are rooted in like their ancestral, culturally aligned foods and are still evolving them. So we have gochujang sauces that people are, younger generations are exploring, and gochujang is a base sauce in Korean cuisine. We have many different kinds of salsas machas and other sort of Mexican style sauces that are both more traditional, but also ones that are changing up the flavors a bit. Most of the folks are local and or Black, Indigenous, or people of color, or women owned. And even if they're not local, they might be part of that demographic, but somewhere else. So there's several different Native owned, tribal owned products that we carry, but maybe the tribe is in what is today Kansas or Minnesota. And then we also carry like 60, 40, 60 is sort of the local BIPOC women or queer owned folks. And then the other 40 is also legacy brands. Like, we are not here to judge the brands that also have kept us alive and grown us up.
Hot Cheetos
So,
and Topo Chico.
Hot Cheetos, we're drinking Topo Chico right now, Spam. And so I think that we're interested in curating the sweet spot of really supporting emerging makers, and especially folks of color, Latinas, women, but also having the legacy comfort foods that are there. And so it is a mix of kitchen pantry basics, especially reflective of the community here at El Sereno and neighboring Alhambra. And that's Latino, Asian, Black, Native, and Indigenous. And then I would say we also are thinking about convenience in ways that reflect our culture. So there's grab and go food, but it's made by local chefs. It's, we have a salmon adobo that's made by Homegirl Cafe. And so like grab and go food that's tasty, nourishing, made in the last 4 days, has to be eaten within 4 days. So really making it so that convenience fits for what us is like values that we learned from our Latino cultures, but a lot of folks of color have like, we want flavor, we want freshness, we want taste, and we want products that are considering the earth as they're being produced, and that all has to be built into convenience. So there's also that. That's my long, short answer.
I think you said, what are you selling in terms of product? It's maybe not in terms of product, but I think it's a sense of nostalgia, right? And the decor, the design, it's beautiful, the feeling that it incites of fresh and homey, and a sense of belonging, a sense of home, right? I can't read your mind. I know. You said like an ode, a love letter to their corner store tiendita, right? Like one of my little notes is la tiendita de la esquina, la cultura a diario, that denotes home, right? Las tortillas las tenemos, los frijoles, la verdura, la coca, la salsa, the daily nourishment, right? One of our guiding principles is a place to gather nourishment daily, right? And nourishment in every sense of the word. The hello, how are you? Or I see you. How's your back? Or how's your hola mi amor? And the babies, remember that they come for tangerines or a boli, right? Or a paleta, that it's like, yes, I know where we're going. I'm getting a paleta. And the face of joy when they walk up the street, they know exactly where to go. Top right corner, top bottom corner is the bolis and the paletas. Top right corner is the local Sad Girl ice cream and 626 ice cream varieties from local folks that are giving these wonderful pop new flavors that are like, oh, for the adults as well, right? And the babies, the paletas, and that ritual, that tradition, that, oh, I remember I used to come to the corner store and do this at the corner shop. We are now that corner shop, right? It's like, hey, it's so cute to see those little people come in.
Yeah.
And that does remind me. So folks can get kitchen pantry basics, fresh grab and go food, but also in our name, and that is local to El Sereno and larger LA, Southern California. But we also have produce. And that's the green grocer part. A good grocer is someone who, as we're learning,
That part.
Yeah,
also
don't
to
forget.
get like fresh ass, sustainably grown food. And so all of the food is grown using organic methods, so not using pesticides, and not all of it has the official license of organic, and that's more political funding, the cost it takes to get that license.
Yeah.
But we work with mostly BIPOC farmers throughout LA, throughout Southern California, and some super micro local. So like in Lincoln Heights and Compton, and these are people who are working the land in a larger context of an awareness of that colonization broke a relationship with the land for so many of us, and so there's a larger context of the healing of both reconnecting to land and what we produce out of that. And so that's what we are hustling to get fresh in our shop several times a week. And so it's seasonal vegetables and also culturally relevant vegetables. So like we have
Even a whole case of fried green tomato, not fried, right? But the green tomatoes, 4 fried green tomatoes. I was like, oh yeah, we gotta get that.
Yeah. And hustling like to make sure we have East Asian greens. And when I say hustling, I mean that we could easily go with a mainstream distributor who just brings vegetables in, or even ones that say organic and are maybe
Higher price point.
Yeah, but like even before we opened, we spent months going to different farmers markets and seeing like which are going to have the vegetables that most reflect the demographics of our community, and then building relationships with those farmers and continuing to come, like it's just all of that goes into what you end up buying, even if it's just bok choy or flor de calabaza. It's coming with this energy, of
that intention of care and for not only for the person and the nutrition, but also for the land and food and fruit, like the whole system of taking care of loving and putting your hard-earned work hours into tending for the fruit that you're going to sell at the market. That's going to feed the family. That's going to create this. Oh, we went to the market and got these delicious, the sweetest strawberries I've ever tasted, right? Or the freshest bread ever is from the corner store at El Sereno.
We do have bomb ass bread. The bread, the
I need
best
to
bread
go.
in LA. How do we know?
I said I need to go.
Oh yeah, well, you do need to go. So this also comes from research. I mean, we connected with Alessandro Jang, who is out of thin air. For some reason it was leaving my head. We connected with him even before we opened, months before we opened. But he is also doing amazing work and is really building a business to support reentry, folks coming out of incarceration and out of rehab. And that's been part of his journey. And he is an amazing baker of bread. And he's apprenticed with Bubs and Grandma for years and is now building out his own company that he's like versed in the traditional Western French baguettes and country loaves and sourdough loaves. And he himself is Korean. And so he's also like, he makes a sesame gochujang loaf, which like takes this Korean based sauce and rubs it in, cooks it into the bread. And it's just divine. So anyway, so like LA is full of amazing creative people expressing their culture and their love and even their sadness through food.
Yeah.
And that is what you can find in the shop.
Yeah.
And I think the culture, the fusion of culture is what you were sharing earlier, is the different representation of, and I really feel like when I walked in the first time that I went in to kind of see it for myself, as they say, you feel that like it's this, your presence, you two, your just humanness and your beauty and your energy shines. And I feel like throughout your space, your store, you see the variety, you see the fusion of culture, and you shared it today, and you had shared it then too about your just in the diligence and the intention around the research of like who and why and connection, and making sure that it was all part of what you wanted to create. And I don't know if that's other stories like in traditional chains, but I kind of doubt that corporations kind of sit around and do business, with that intentionality. And so, and that just super focused. So I feel like as you're sharing it, you're putting words to what I felt when
Aw.
I stepped in through your doors. And I'm like, not just saying that, like I really felt, and everybody that would come through the door were just welcomed with a smile and embraced. And I was like, wow, this is like such a special place. So all of you that are listening, go and just experience it for yourself. I promise you, you are gonna feel just the 10 million pounds of love and everything that was just shared right now. So thank you for sharing that and walking us through that. That's beautiful. And so I kind of think about, you shared kind of your journey towards the how the store came to be, and those things. But if you take us back to your niñez and your childhood, I always like to ask this question because I'm always curious, but I feel like it also kind of shapes kind of where we go in life and where we are today. Did you kind of just wake up one day as a 5-year-old kid and say, one day I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to open a store? Like where do you think that kind of ultimate desire or creativity, because it comes from somewhere, it didn't just kind of happen one day, right? Like it's a part of who you are as a person.
Yeah.
So share with everyone that's listening just a little bit of kind of just growing up, and what of those experiences maybe you kind of reflect on now as business owner, as adults, as in this journey. I know it's kind of a loaded question, but
I mean, it's a great question. It's super reflective. So thank you for it.
I think for me, as I've matured in age or progressed, I
you
guess.
don't look
in
a day
life,
over 16.
I think, you hear it from some folks and be like, oh, I knew when I was this old that I wanted to be this. And
Mhm.
then it's like, nope, never had that. Never knew it. I mean, I remember there was periods of time where I knew I wanted to be a spy, right? It's like, yes, I'm gonna be a spy, right? I love it. 007. I love it. As I got older, and then when I was in the military, right? I was like, I changed my mind on that spy situation. It's too much work. Like they're always getting hurt, they're always getting beat up, they're always life-threatening, like he's always saving somebody and about to be killed. Like
He's always a he.
yeah, that too, right? Anyways, I ended up being that I didn't want to be James Bond. I wanted to be the lover of James Bond. Yeah, where we got all the anyways. That's a tangent, but
My first time hearing that one. Okay.
That's for another interview. No.
anyways, I ended up not being wanting to do that either because they always die, right?
Oh, I have
So there
this,
was
yeah.
I was like, no, I don't really.
A road of disappointment
Yeah.
on the spy journey.
Spy situation, like all this adventurous things. And it's like, oh, but it's always listening or looking for that purpose or finding your way, right? And as I've come to age every year, I'm like, I enjoy turning to my next age. It gets better and better as I get older, right? Because I think I've learned to listen more as I get older, not only to myself, but to the environment, to the energy, the communication that we all interact with ourselves, right? Everybody's connected. And as I sit and listen and reflect and just listen to my own vibration, if you want to call it, right? I listen to my own energy. Am I happy with it? Am I happy with myself? Am I happy how I act or interact in the world, or how I show care and affection for others? Am I okay with myself doing that, right? And how that I live my day to day. And if I'm okay with that, that's the things that are within my capacity and my control to impact change and to live a better life or to feel better about the way I live, right? So I've learned to listen more as I get older. And as I listen more, I hear with clarity the things that I need to do. And if I listen to those things, they the universe has a way of laying them right before you,
Mm.
right? To making it happen and land right in front of you in a way that you can interact. It's like, oh, you said you wanted to do this. Well, here's an opportunity to,
Yeah.
right? And it's like acting upon it and not being scared or dreadful or being confined by, I've never done it before, or nobody has experience. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to fail. Being like, okay, well, I've already tried all these other things. What's wrong with trying something new? What's the worst that can happen? I fail and I try something else, right? Just like how I've lived my life. Great. I figure out if we can do it, great. And once I've done it, excellent. Do I want to keep doing it or do I want to try something else?
Yeah. Yeah. You learn to channel just very organically what you like. I think about like you wanting to be a spy, and I think about, okay, but those skills, right? Or even the desire, like the curiosity behind that, or
Yeah.
like you said, being observant, like those are qualities and characteristics that make you who you are. And you've carried that into this role, about curiosity and asking questions and observing people and what their needs are and responding to needs, and right. So it's really interesting to hear kind of that, like, what do you want to be when I grow up? But then some of that got translated into what you are
Yeah.
doing as you are growing up, so it's really neat to hear kind of the, your ambition for when you were younger, and how that changed, and yet again, a lot of that you're still leading with that. So that's
Mhm.
really neat. That's really awesome. Yeah. Patty, did you want to be the spy?
No, I didn't have that much interest in being a spy, but I did have, I would say I was not somebody, I could not imagine what I wanted to do. I come from a family of teachers, and it was clear I did not want to be a teacher. Just because teachers are everyday heroes, which I think every worker is, but I saw my mom raised 6 of us as a single mom, and it was hard on a teacher salary. And it was also amazing. We got, but it was just, that was a clear possibility route that I was not interested in. And the educator is always there. And so I think once you grow up with educators, sort of how I learned how to communicate. But I feel like as a young child, I couldn't quite imagine what the future held. And I think that somewhere along the road, thanks to my mom and thanks to the educators that I had, I was encouraged to keep feeding my imagination. And so shout out to all the teachers. And so I think that as I started getting older, I got more and more anxious seeing the very limited roles that were there in the workforce, in the work world, and was not really interested in any of this sort of adult life that was being offered, and I would even say before I knew I was queer, I was already questioning, like, why is this it? And even and I'm a white-skinned person, I have a lot of privilege. And as a woman, as somebody who was a survivor of gender-based violence, so I suffer from anxiety. I just thought there has to be more for us, And so I think in my 20s, I did actually embrace the word entrepreneur, and I embraced it more. I called it social entrepreneur. And it was in the Bay, and at the time a lot of folks in movement spaces were talking about it, but sort of like looking at the world as this place of possibility, but also a place that is full of problems. And so, like, how could we build collectives to think creatively about how to address those problems? And so I think, like, this idea of a social entrepreneur, somebody who's like imagining and thinking, and meaning, like, you might not have a career. You're like you're making things happen in the world, and it's not going to be tied to an income or necessarily to like 2.1 kids and a husband and a white picket fence. And so those were things that I was really grappling with in my teens and 20s, and deciding, like, I am interested in living this life as somebody who's okay with living outside of the boxes, And so social entrepreneur sort of helped me think about and helped start a nonprofit in my 20s that was working with young women in the hood where I'm from, to think about their cities and what they want to change and how to look at like root problems of things and address those. And I feel like that did teach me to be okay with failure, which is a hard lesson. But I think that there's a beautiful Ocean Bong, the writer, talks about it as a tradition of failure that many queer people, and I would also say many women, nobody quite teaches us. No one teaches us how to be a woman in the world or a Latina in the business world. And we do have to learn through experimenting and failure. And it's a beautiful tradition in many senses. So like, I think in my 20s, I did get the bite of, oh, I don't have to just take the jobs that are on LinkedIn or on Indeed, you know, like I can hustle and I can rest and I can use the relationships that I have and create something that is accountable to my community and to myself. And that is on some level what an entrepreneur also is like, you know, being visionary and doing things that don't quite exist or making them, but deeply pragmatic, deeply like connected to the people who you're doing this with and for.
Yeah, I love that. And so kind of going back to the business specifically, what kind of inspired you? I know you shared, you know, the story on kind of how you got there, but what really kind of pushed you to that, like, okay, we're gonna do this, to that, like, going from kind of maybe aspiration or desire to action, and walking through the steps of that action, right? Because I think
Yeah.
the doing and the thinking are related, but they're two different things, right? We could be thinking kind of about it, but once we actually start going through the process, like what inspired you to take that and come up with that concept of the green grocer, and the fact that you wanted it to be a space of community and bringing all those other business, or you know, multiple businesses, multiple representation together.
I mean, my response is I didn't want to work the way I was working like that anymore. I was doing solar panel installation to learn how to be sustainable for the community garden, right? I had gone into that work and like, I'm not gonna theorize it anymore because I've done the education route, right? It's still not fulfilling in the way that I was enticed into believing that an education would create something. And now I'm experiencing myself and was able to say, no, I'm going to do it. So, para que nadie me lo platique, yo lo voy a hacer con mis propias manos, right? So it's, I went, just the same thing I did, why I joined the military, right? Like, you know what? I'm not going to, no me voy a quedar con las ganas. I'm going to try it para que nadie me diga nada. And nobody can negate my opinion because of my lived experience. So roofing in the summer, solar panels, no matter how trendy the company is a prime example of corporate exploitation at the expense of Black and brown labor across the board. And there's only so much you can, so much pressure you can inflict on a neck before they stop breathing. In the wake of all the mass murders that happen by the state, by the institutions, that's a whole other thing. But we are acutely aware of it because it is in our communities, right? So we can move from a place of awareness versus look the other way or pretend it's not there. How do we choose to engage our community in a way that is healthful, that provides support and assistance in creating an alternative to the systems of incarceration and exploitation that we've created in terms of.
Wait, so back to you feeling a lot of pressure at,
you know,
as a roofer,
right?
You were done.
Yes. So what can I do with that's within my power to create change in my community? Right? I can't control the corporations. I don't have the wealth or capital to move mountains, but I can work with being caring for myself and my well-being and being caring for the health and well-being of those around me, right? Immediately. I can't change the world, but I can work to impact my community in a better way.
Mhm.
And I do think things like, you know, there's many, a lot of life that is taken prematurely and murder that happens. And I think George Floyd specifically was happening while you were at the roofing company, and a lot of the national conversation around that. And that did help us, you know, think about who are we accountable to, who are we helping to create more livable life for, and what can we do to do that. And it did mean like, where are we right now? What are the steps we can do from here? And that was around, we started that real conversation right before the pandemic and then during the pandemic. And Erika's work was a big, the time thing, you know, it was like, we're years in and this is not getting any better. And then I think with my work, there was a natural, there was a program that I was helping and it was coming to its end. It had like a sunset. And so it sort of gave a good time for us to be like, okay, we know that this program is ending. We know that we aren't having children in that sense. We both have helped raise other children, but we're not like, that's not where this next sort of chapter of our life is going to go. And so around 2019, 2021, the decision was clear, like, we love the garden. None of us at the garden produce enough food to sell, but we feel committed enough to, and we know, I mean, many of the people we sell in the shop is who we have found over the last few years that we have in our home also. And so I think the decision specifically for the Green Grocer happened also in conversation with friends who share our passion for, I mean, I guess at the heart, like access to good, healthy, culturally relevant food. And so, yeah, it just came up, it came through that. And
Sharing food with friends.
Yeah.
And then and being ready. I mean, I think this is probably why a lot of people finally take that step of like, life is going to be full of really hard work. And you're gonna need to like, at some point you get tired enough of like working hard for someone else who actually is so far removed from you that you can feel the lack of care, you know, like, and I would say I did not have that experience, but I still was ready to leave the nonprofit world. Because there's a different tax there. There, it's like there's an expectation that you just work because you're a bleeding heart on some level, you know. But I think in the corporate world, it's some of the larger corporations are so
Not in tune, not aligned.
not in tune with the workers. And so everything sort of aligned, and it felt right to be doing, I guess, the corner shop. I'm trying to think about, like, was there a particular conversation?
I think the particular conversation that stirred it up is the decision to go for it. Because we had done all this planning and all this back end work, and the time came where it's like, okay, are we going to do it? Yes or no? Right. And it was over dinner with our friend that was helping us do numbers on Valentine's Day, right? As our date.
Yeah. Because like for 2 years, I had been looking at spaces. I had been learning how to write a business plan while we are still working. And then we decided that we were going to, I couldn't find any place. We wanted a spot on this main street in El Sereno. And so we sort of put it all on the back burner. And then literally the spot opened up across the street from us. And we suddenly, but it needed a lot of work. So we were like, oh shit, we weren't planning on like completely renovating a place. You know, we have like $20,000 saved up. this place won't be ready for at least another 6 to 8 months. So we did need to like crunch numbers and take a big leap of faith that that capital was gonna come, which it hasn't totally, which is one of the struggles. But because it takes money to start a business, you know, more than $20,000 if you're doing a brick and mortar sometimes that needs to be renovated. And so I think it was that last conversation where we were like, this is the space we've been wanting. We have enough of a network and friends and licensed plumbers and electricians in our network, very much thanks to the roofing and to our work at the community garden. And so I think that the actual place becoming available is what pushed us into doing it.
Like where else or when else would we come up with a place across the street that is walkable to the garden? Like,
It's like, and we had been looking for a year and a half just to see, and there was just, you know, there's limited buildings on the main thoroughfare here in El Sereno, and then there are some buildings, but they're wrapped up right now in owner struggles over the space of siblings owners, and so they're just refusing to rent them out. So there's like, it's
history.
hard.
There's
history. And that even goes back to just like how challenging it is to be immigrants, to be Latinos, to be like trying to make it in this world, you know? And so there's now like siblings whose parents have left them buildings and they're not able to rent them out yet because they're still struggling over the ownership. So we've really like, we honor that too, you know, like I don't know what that must be like. And so when a place finally did come up after a long time, and that place also feels very auspicious. It's where we're at now. It was a salon before, and the woman, after 44 years, retired, and she still drives around in her bright orange Camaro. And she's, you know, like in her mid-70s, and I feel like just really left a space that needed renovation, but a space that had like a vivacious community vibe to it also. So that feels good.
Definitely. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really great. And I think leads into kind of your bigger purpose or your bigger mission. You know, what do you see as your mission for both personal and through the store? What is your bigger purpose, your bigger mission around the store? And how is that really tied to your vision for moving forward? What do you want to continue to do? What do you want new things you may want to do? Or kind of how does your mission, I keep using the word infused, but it's my word of the day.
There you go.
Use your mission in your everyday work and for the vision of how you want to grow your business.
a place to gather nourishment daily.
It's the vision.
And that takes many forms, right? A place to gather nourishment daily. Some people call it the refrigerator. Some people call it church. Some people call it connection. Some people call it a sandwich and a drink, right? Or a Snickers and a Topo Chico, you know, like actually to a family that just started coming, it means a mochi every time, a boba mochi every time they come into the shop and say hello to the shopkeeper, right? Which is me, right? It's so cute. And it's like, yeah, I don't know, whatever nourishment that you might need, I hope we can give you a little bit of that when you come into the shop, right? The El Sereno Green Grocer should be a corner shop in all the neighborhoods, right? It can be a Montebello Green Grocer. It can be a what is that? Give me another.
Lincoln Heights. Wasn't ready.
Yeah, we even plug in the name, right?
Yeah, right. And with the concept of not necessarily being ours, is necessarily being a part of the community in the way that we're so intentionally trying to create this vibe, right? Or this shop, this grocer. What does it mean to have a community market in every neighborhood, right? What does that mean for the folks that live in that neighborhood? What does it mean for the people that take on that role of having that corner shop in that neighborhood, right? So it's about sharing our learning experience of like, oh, well, what did we do? Where are we, right? Place-based, community-based, like let's listen and let's build with that. The green grocer in El Sereno is going to be different than the green grocer in Lincoln Heights, than the green grocer in Montebello, right? We might be co-piloting this or stewarding somebody else's that pursue their dream that wants to be that for their neighborhood, right? We want one next to my mother-in-law's house in Redwood City, so we can have a corner shop legacy there as well, right? For the community to enjoy, for us to enjoy, for our nibblings to enjoy. That's the bigger vision of creating nourishment on the very literal sense, and in the nurturing and spiritual or otherworldly sense of nourishment.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I would add that it's a vision, and there's like in the nonprofit world, there's like, what's the big, hairy, bold, audacious vision? I don't know if you all have heard that,
Yeah.
but and even when we were first thinking about like, even thinking about who we were and what our visuals were going to look like, it did feel right to say like, it's kind of very simple. Also, it's just this place to gather nourishment daily. And I think that there's a lot of ways that can get more nuanced that is helpful for us. So for instance, like it is a disruption to like a larger food manufacturing industry, like in order to gather it daily, that means we're having fresh produce in there regularly. If we're not working with these huge distributors that are flying it in from other parts of the world and then bringing it to a bus to us, that means we're figuring out how to hustle to get to the smaller families. So it is like, we're not claiming that we are going to save the world and disrupt the food industry totally, but we are in these small ways figuring out how to contribute to the place that we live in and to make this place more accountable to the people that live here and the foods and the food ways and the stories that like are available here. It just, somebody has to actually do that coordinating to make it so that both the bitter melon or bok choy and the jalapeno is in the shop, and it's fresh, and it's coming from people who are doing regenerative farming, so like, and it's priced appropriately. Almost all of our produce is sold pretty much at cost. So we have like really thought about how do we balance what's in the shop so that the produce is coming for pretty much the price the farmers are selling it. And so, and that is an issue in some pockets of LA, including ours, like fresh, locally produced food that isn't super expensive, and so that's part of the nuance of what is in this very simple vision of like a place to gather nourishment. And then I think as we continue to grow and roll out, like we really hold the online space as part of that. And so right now we've only rolled out our Instagram platform, but we have a website. The website was the first thing we built years ago. So we're updating it, but we do envision growing this as also an online space for nourishment. And that can be in the form of knowledge, conversations around what does culturally relevant food mean, recipe sharing. Somebody is already like coordinating a book club. And so so really the space is both the brick and mortar, but for us, that's on a spectrum with the hybrid online space that we envision, where people can go to, you want to go over there? And gather nourishment, whether that's around learning how herbal medicines work or finding out about vendors that are just down the street from them. So I think like there's a lot of room to play with this vision. That's quite simple. But we do see the online space, including things like in the future, online shopping and delivery and pickup, but also a place where people are sort of reclaiming what food means to us, and And it doesn't have, not everyone even has to love cooking at all. But it's such a central part of our life. Sorry, please.
Transferring over.
Okay, friend. It's such a central part of humanity, and so we are just a little contribution to lifting up the ways that it can tell our different cultural stories, that it can keep these ancient traditions alive while still evolving them. And for me, it's still very much part of healing. Like, so much of the violence that is survived in this world comes from disconnection or feeling like not belonging. And this is one area where we can really, on a day-to-day basis, sort of reclaim our wholeness.
Yes, I love that. That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that in that way. And again, I think the community that you're building and all the potential, no pressure, right, that you have to grow will come with time, right, as well. I mean, I think it's such beautiful to see that just kind of naturally progress. And I know as you give, the world gives back, right? And that's, the connections continue to happen. So that's really beautiful. And I don't want to put a damper on that, but I did want to get to the question around challenges. And I know we're kind of closing out our time here. But what struggles or challenges did you face or are you facing that, again, you feel comfortable sharing? Because I know there's some that we may not, but that you feel comfortable sharing with those that are listening, and how I don't know if I want to use the word overcoming them, maybe working through them is a better way to kind of illustrate that, but talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think the journey is always getting clarity on the vision, right? Because once you have that clarity, you can move yourself through. So that was a challenge in terms of like developing and progressing and being serious and putting it on paper and planning it out. The planning part, it's like, oh, we're really doing this, right? That's like, oh, that means we're really going to act on it then, because we're putting all these steps in place to roll it out. So that was a good, like, once we made that decision to be like, okay, let's do it. You get a very quick introduction and very steep learning plank, I'm calling it, because that's not a curve, where your lack of access to capital and finance really come right up and smack you in the nose. Makes your eyes water. You're like, wait, what? As a non-traditional anything, a couple, Patricia and I, it's like, wait, you need what? Look, we have, what else do you want? They need the history and the papers to show that we have wealth, and we do not. And we do not, right? So access to capital continues to be the challenge, even with our years of planning, right? The business plan, it's like common knowledge, like, no, your business is going to be
the first year, it's going to be really volatile, and you want to have
the cushion to hold you
cash
through that, right? It's like, wait, in addition to like the cash flow that I needed to start this in the first place, like how much more cash flow do I need to get started or to live it out, right? Anything in LA has to last longer than 3 years or 5 years to prove that it's sustainable, right? But most businesses fail within that first 3 years. And we're like, wait, what? And so it's just that overwhelmness of like lack of capital and access to capital.
And we spent a lot of time taking classes at SBA and SBDC, so Small Business Association, and SBA, and then the SBA Development Center, thank you. And they're great. And it's really discouraging to hear, like, well, think smaller and start smaller. And yes, like we could start with just a truck that delivers groceries, but it really, we weren't that excited about that. So like we had to think, it could be a place where we would get really bitter. And I think, and we are already like, we both have had jobs and pretty like, what is that word called? Same consecutive work, constant work. And we don't have human children. And so we've been able to save on some level some money. Like I said, we had this like little $20,000 that took us years to get to. And we thought we could like leverage it and make it, and we have, but we had to build out relationships that we met through the SBA with people who were willing to work with us in different ways to get like essentially a business loan, but it was a personal loan, to take like a bigger step, to really experiment with this, and we're okay if it doesn't work, we lose money. Okay. I mean, we're like willing to take these leaps, and it was very challenging to find anybody willing to invest, which I get it, because it's a business that hasn't started yet. But I think it really helped us see like, oh, this is like a structural barrier, like if you don't come from generational wealth, it is very challenging to start something at any scale other than just sort of like working outside of your home, like it's the whole, once you get into brick and mortars and the licensing and all the time it takes to research everything, you just need a bulk of money. And that's been the biggest challenge, but also has forced us to grow in different ways. So I've never wanted to be a fundraiser, but we've definitely done a few like asks both with friends and family. We've done more like bank applications and things like that in the last 2 years than
we ever recommend.
Yeah. And we've gotten declined on most of them. And then what has come through those processes is relationships. So now we have, basically he's our financial advisor, and he's a queer Colombiano who is like all about connecting folks who are not just coming from generational wealth. And so we, through him and through other, like a banker that we met at Chase, who was like so on our side, we're learning about the world of nonprofit lenders. We're learning about, which I didn't even know was a thing, and so it's like, again, this tradition of failure, we're learning. But it is a barrier. I'm sure you hear this from other Latinas or entrepreneurs, like the capital just to get started, just to even experiment and fail. It's not even an option, and it should.
A lot of lenders don't give to what they consider startups, right? Which is those that are just starting out. And it could be like you all have experience in your different fields. You've kind of been, let's say, part of the garden for, years before. So all of that expertise and experience accounts for something. So in my opinion, if someone kind of comes in and is starting out with like, I've been doing, I don't know, construction my whole life and I want to open a bakery. Well, maybe there's a little bit more of a disconnect there, right? But if there's experience with working with the community or the garden, and now I want to supply fresh fruit and products in a store, right? There's more of a like connection there in terms of like experience, I'm going to say. And so that's not always counted, unfortunately, right? It's looked at as like, what do you have started, or how long have you been in business? Where I can't be in business that long if I don't get help and capital to start the business in the first place. So it's kind of like I think they call it like a catch-22, right? Like or like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Like I need investment to order to do X, whatever I want to do, but I have to do this first, then to get the money later. It's just it is a system that isn't as cooperative as it's marketed all the time.
Right. And it does. I mean, the bankers themselves, They're like, wait, we're getting pressured to create these loans and these zip codes. And here I find the most viable candidates and you still turn them down. Like, what do you
For,
want?
you know,
right?
and yeah, so I think banks are also trying to figure out what they're doing right now. So like we were going through a large bank that we were not recruited, but we were asked, please apply for a business loan. Because that bank is doing an initiative for women, military vets, Latinas
Minorities.
in our zip code for startups. And so he was
Wow.
like, you are it, please do this.
Yeah.
And then the decline was because we hadn't opened yet and we had no profit. And so, you know, so I think even internally, the banks are trying to figure out how to be more nimble and agile and like move money. I don't know if there's federal requirements that they need to move money into certain communities more, but it'll be interesting to see how that changes. And then I think the other challenge is that we are experiencing right now is just how to grow sustainably. So we have like ourselves and we have 2 folks who are part-time and there's so much we want to do. All of us want to do. And also we just are like trying to pause and remember we're just in our 3rd week of being open.
Wow.
And so we're just getting some, you know, we're like, well, we've already done a lot of programming for just 3 weeks. So we got to sort of pace ourselves, I think. And like, so I think having those check-ins with each other, making time to make sure we're still meeting, that is not just at the shop during some downtime, you know, I think like we are structuring that in, but it's challenging because there's all this energy to just like
Go, go, go.
And so I think that the challenge is
Slowing down.
yeah, slowing down.
Yeah.
It's a good challenge. Like there's amazing momentum. It's amazing that things are sold out, but the Virgo in me is like, we need to reorder those right now. You know, yes, we do. And we need to order them in a timely way, but also we need to make sure we have dinner together tonight and take the dog on a walk. So I feel like, I think something also a lot of Latinas have is this like need to be excellent in all that they do and, you know, overperform in this society. And so I think that this is a place where we get to like, yes, we can be excellent, but we don't have to do 5 times the amount of work. That
Like self pressure, right? That we put on ourselves and I mean, I think as a society, you know, that pressure is very real in a lot of ways, and then sometimes I create that for myself, and I don't necessarily need to. Like you said, slowing down, right? What is that? But how does that kind of fall into place with the momentum and the energy that you have? Because you don't want to hamper that either.
right.
So
So I think we're like, wait, but this is happening right now. Wait, let's slow down. But wait, you know, we're just in the 3rd week. So I think we're navigating it. And it's a challenge. Yeah.
That's a good word. That's a good word. Well, as we close our time together here, thank you again, because time is so precious. And just the fact that you're sitting here with me, having this conversation and sharing your journey with all our listeners, I appreciate so much. And kind of as in our closing statements, what advice or what guidance or counsel would you give to other women, other Latina business owners, entrepreneurs that are kind of in their business, and whether that be in the midst of it or just starting out? You know, I think sometimes it's that just not knowing where to turn. We hear a lot about that too, right? Is that, you know, they don't feel supported or don't have the support. But so what would you share or say to those women, business owners? Your words of wisdom, I guess is how we'll phrase it.
I think we hear it, and I think it's important to reiterate that we are not alone. And it might feel vulnerable to reach out and say, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm nervous about this, right? Or I don't know if this is going to work. Like just being able to walk through that vulnerability with someone or with a trusted friend or with a group that we're trying it too. And these are our challenges, and these are our, nervous moments, but
Yeah.
these are our rewards, or this is why I do it, or this is my driver.
Yeah.
Is helpful. Sharing space and sharing community is very helpful because you don't feel alone. And while our challenges are our own, knowing that that somebody will be there to listen or to console or just to take a deep breath with, and if there's nothing else, be like, I'm listening and I hear you. And let's breathe a few breaths together. Is the way we can get into tomorrow and the next day after that, and just live one day and one breath at a time, knowing that we have somewhere to go and we're not the only ones walking towards our goals.
Thank you. Thank you. Eddie?
I would add, I think just an ongoing assessment of what practices of care are in one's life. And so I guess by that I mean self-care, but also community care, but like I know that for us, in many ways, this shop is not about ambition. And that's been a big thing in my life, at least. Like I've had a lot of goals and I want to get them, and it's sort of like a very pressure-based thing. And so this has sort of emerged really organically. I didn't plan it. And it just feels very caring. It's both for ourselves, it's for the community, and that helps to balance when things get overwhelming, like just sort of coming back to the vision of it. And so, and for us, our vision is around a place of nourishment, a place of care, but it does come back to like, when someone is starting something new, there's going to be a lot of hard moments. And so what are the practices that people already have in place that genuinely bring nervous system regulation, that genuinely bring access to a skill that might need to be developed, but I feel like really checking in with yourself to see what feels most caring in a genuine sense, not just in terms of what's going to like get my goal checked. That seems to be really important. And the shop, I think, wouldn't have gotten this far if we weren't moving, as Erika says, at the pace of capacity.
Yeah.
And that's also hard to balance with ambition. And many entrepreneurs are ambitious, and visionary. And it does have to be, or I have found that it must be braided with pausing and caring for, for us, it's helped to have a dog. Like the world is bigger than this shop. And
he has to poop and pee regularly.
And so, or for people who have children, like I talk to a lot of business owners whose children are now older and they feel they've missed out on their younger lives, their kids. And it's almost impossible, but I would say, I hope that we can figure out how to slow down and continue to enjoy this little dog in our life, because it's really easy to, not that people stop caring, but just to move fast. And there's like a lack of attention to ourselves and the people or animals in our lives.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Those are very wise words, and thank you for sharing those. So we've come to the conclusion of our interview, and I want to thank you again so much. Any final thoughts or any invitation you may want to make for folks to visit you?
I invite you to the shop. Come through.
Yeah, and you can, right now we're on the Instagram at El Sereno Green Grocer. That's an invitation for folks to come and start engaging with us on the socials. Right now we have good fresh bread that's delivered every Wednesday and Saturday. So if you're going to come for the first time and you like delicious bread, come then.
Yeah. Come in the morning because,
it does sell out. But also I would say, like, we invite you to engage with us. We look forward to engaging in the Bella Entrepreneurs like community. And I think the invitation is just to like accompany us as we grow and, you know, invite us to accompany you as you grow and just be human together.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Everyone that's listening, please go out and support these wonderful human beings, these beauties we have here, and visit the store, visit the shop. It's a amazing space. I know
Thanks.
you'll feel it too. So thank you again, both of you, and we'll see everybody next time for the next interview. Bye, everyone.
Gracias, y'all.
Adios.